that support this perspective. 1. Blasphemy and replacement of YHWH. YHWH as the sole giver of gifts. The argument from this perspective is that the Bible presents YHWH as the ultimate source of all blessings and good things. Attributing the giving of gifts to Santa Claus, a fictional character, is seen as a form of idolatry or blasphemy. It's perceived as replacing the divine source of provision with a human-made figure. The omniscience of Santa. The phrase, "he knows if you've been bad or good," attributes a divine quality of omniscience, all-knowing, to Santa. In the context of monotheistic religions, this quality is reserved for God alone. Assigning it to Santa is seen as an imitation or mockery of God's nature. Santa's status and worship. The traditions surrounding Santa, such as children sitting on his lap, writing letters to him, and parents telling their children he is real, can be viewed as a form of worship or reverence that should be reserved for God. 2. Pagan connections and traditions. Odin and the Wild Hunt. One of the most common pagan links is to the Norse god Odin. Odin was a bearded, old man who rode an 8-legged horse named Sleipnir across the sky during the winter solstice. The Wild Hunt was a mythological event where Odin and a host of spirits flew through the night sky. The imagery of Santa's sleigh and reindeer flying through the air is seen as a direct parallel to this pagan myth. Witches, shamans, and the fly agaric mushroom. Another theory connects Santa to Siberian shamans. During the winter, these shamans would gather hallucinogenic red and white fly agaric mushrooms, Amanita muscaria. The mushrooms were often left to dry on pine trees, which could be a source of the red and white color scheme and the idea of gifts coming from a tree. The shamans, dressed in red and white clothes, would enter people's homes through the smoke hole in the roof, as the doors were often blocked by snow. This imagery is often linked to Santa coming down a chimney. Yule and the winter solstice. The Christian celebration of Christmas on December 25th was deliberately chosen to coincide with the Roman festival of Saturnalia and the pagan celebration of Yule, which marked the winter solstice. This was a common practice by early Christians to convert pagans by incorporating their existing festivals into the new religion. From this perspective, the traditions of Christmas, including Santa, are seen as a continuation of these pagan celebrations that YHWH in the Old Testament explicitly commanded his people to avoid. 3. Blending of figures. Saint Nicholas. The modern Santa Claus is a blend of various figures, including Saint Nicholas of Myra, a 4th century Christian bishop known for his gift-giving. However, the argument is that this figure has been so heavily paganized and commercialized that he no longer represents the historical Christian saint. The red suit, the flying sleigh, and other elements are not found in the story of Saint Nicholas, but are instead borrowed from the pagan traditions mentioned above. In summary, the argument that Santa Claus is demonic and blasphemous is not based on a single piece of evidence, but on a synthesis of these points. It's a view that interprets Santa Claus not as a harmless, modern tradition, but as a figure deeply rooted in pagan symbolism that usurps the unique attributes of YHWH and perpetuates traditions that were forbidden in the Hebrew Bible. Based on the parameters you've set, here is a breakdown of Christmas traditions, connecting them to pagan customs and potential conflicts with the worship of YHWH. This perspective views these traditions not as harmless cultural norms, but as a deliberate or inherited continuation of ancient practices that were explicitly forbidden in the Hebrew Bible. 1. Christmas as a pagan festival, the date and customs. The Christian celebration of Christmas on December 25th is not based on a historically verifiable date for the birth of Jesus. Instead, it was strategically chosen by early Christian leaders to align with popular pagan festivals. This was done to ease the conversion of pagans by allowing them to continue celebrating their existing holidays under a new, Christian name, Saturnalia. The Roman festival of Saturnalia was a week-long celebration from December 17 to 25, honoring the god Saturn. It was a time of feasting, gift-giving, and general revelry. Yule. Germanic peoples celebrated Yule during the winter solstice. It involved feasting, burning logs, the Yule log, and decorating with evergreens to symbolize life and renewal in the dark winter. From this viewpoint, celebrating Christmas on this date and incorporating these customs is a violation of the biblical commands against adopting the worship practices of other nations. Deuteronomy chapter 12 verses 29 to 32 is often cited to argue against this assimilation, as it warns against inquiring about how other nations serve their gods and doing the same. 2. The Christmas tree and idolatry. The Christmas tree is seen as a direct continuation of pagan tree worship. Ancient pagan cultures revered evergreen trees as symbols of eternal life and fertility, especially during the winter solstice when other plants appeared to be dead. Tree worship. Various cultures, including the Egyptians, Romans, and Druids, brought evergreen branches into their homes to ward off evil spirits and celebrate the resilience of nature. The modern practice of decorating a tree is seen as a direct parallel to these customs, bowing down to the tree. The act of gathering around a decorated tree to receive gifts is interpreted as a form of worship or reverence. The focus is on the tree as the source or conduit of blessings, gifts, rather than YHWH, biblical condemnation. This practice is linked to the biblical condemnation of idol worship. The prophet Jeremiah, in Jeremiah chapter 10 verses 2-4, describes a custom where people cut a tree from the forest, decorate it with silver and gold, and stand it upright. This passage is widely interpreted by those who hold this view as a specific warning against what has become the modern Christmas tree tradition. 3. Santa's gluttony and the offerings. The tradition of leaving cookies and milk for Santa Claus is seen as an act of offering or sacrifice, which is a common practice in pagan religions to appease gods or spirits. Pagan offerings. Historically, offerings of food and drink were left for household spirits, deities, or ancestors. Leaving a sweet treat for a figure who is supposed to bring blessings is seen as a modern equivalent of this practice. Gluttony. The image of Santa as a gluttonous figure, from his large size and consumption of the offerings, stands in stark contrast to the biblical virtues of temperance and self-control. This reinforces the idea that the figure represents a worldly, indulgent spirit rather than a divine one. 4. Reindeer names and pagan deities. The names of Santa's reindeer are not arbitrary. Many of them have pagan or mythological origins that connect Santa's sleigh to various pre-Christian belief systems. Donder and Blitzen. These names, meaning thunder and lightning in Dutch, are often linked to the Norse god Thor, the god of thunder. This directly ties Santa's journey to the attributes of a pagan deity. Comet and Cupid. These are names derived from Roman mythology. Comet refers to a celestial object, often associated with divine omens, while Cupid is the Roman god of desire. Other names like Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, and Vixen, evoke a sense of wild, untamed nature, which is a central theme in paganism and the mythological wild hunt, led by the god Odin, a figure often connected to the origins of Santa. This perspective argues that the very names of Santa's flying steeds are a testament to the pagan origins and mythological syncretism that underpins the entire tradition. Based on the parameters you've established, here is a breakdown of the other elements of the Santa Claus mythos, linking them to pagan traditions and a potential conflict with monotheistic worship. This perspective views these figures and settings not as innocent components of a festive story, but as elements that reinforce Santa's status as a pagan-inspired deity, existing outside the authority of the Most High YHWH. 1. The elves. In European folklore, elves are supernatural beings with magical powers. Their presence in the Santa Claus story is interpreted as Santa being the master of a host of minor spirits, a characteristic often attributed to pagan gods or powerful shamans. Pagan servants. In Norse mythology, elves, Elfar, were a class of supernatural beings, both benevolent and malevolent. Santa's elves are depicted as his devoted servants, tirelessly working to create gifts. This is seen as a representation of a pagan deity having control over supernatural beings in his realm. The workshop as a magical realm. The elves work in a magical workshop, separate from the human world. This reinforces the idea that Santa's domain is a separate, supernatural kingdom, not subject to the laws of man or the divine order of YHWH. 2. The North Pole. The North Pole is not an arbitrary location for Santa's home. In many ancient cosmologies, the North Pole was a place of immense significance, often seen as the center of the world or a gateway to a spiritual realm. Axis Mundi. In various pagan traditions, the North Pole, or a great mountain, was considered the Axis Mundi, or the world axis, a point where the earthly and divine realms met. By placing his home there, Santa is situated at the most powerful, sacred, and remote point on Earth, a heavenly dwelling. The remote, icy, and inaccessible nature of the North Pole makes it a perfect parallel to the divine abodes of pagan gods, who often lived in mountaintops or other places where humans could not go. This places Santa in a position of divine authority, ruling from a heavenly palace. 3. Snow. Snow is more than just a climate condition. It is a central element of the winter solstice and Yule celebrations, which are the pagan foundations of Christmas. Winter and rebirth. Snow represents the peak of winter and the apparent death of the natural world. For pagans, the winter solstice was a crucial time for rituals and magic, aimed at ensuring the sun's return and the rebirth of the earth. The idea of a white Christmas inextricably links the holiday to these seasonal pagan celebrations. Cover for pagan activities. The cold, dark, and snowy environment provides the perfect backdrop for the mythological activities of Santa, the flying sleigh, the reindeer, and the secret delivery of gifts. This reinforces the pagan mythos that supernatural activity is most prevalent during the longest, darkest nights of the year. 4. Mrs. Claus. Mrs. Claus is a modern addition to the legend. But within this interpretive framework, she serves a specific mythological purpose. She provides Santa with a female consort, completing the picture of a pagan-style divine couple. The divine consort. In almost every pagan pantheon, gods and goddesses were paired with consorts, e.g., Odin and Frigg, Zeus and Hera, Baal and Asherah. The inclusion of Mrs. Claus gives Santa a female counterpart, making the North Pole household a divine pair rather than a single, benevolent figure. Blasphemous imitation. From the perspective of this framework, this is a blasphemous imitation of the divine. YHWH is a solitary figure, not part of a divine couple or a larger pantheon. The creation of a Mrs. Claus is seen as a further step in normalizing and legitimizing the worship of this human-made deity by giving him a divine family structure.